to Mr. Harvey for passing out some matters that Dr. Gupta wants us to have.
We're not going to be able to understand you like that.
Is that better? Can you hear me now? All right. Thank you. We would like to now call to order this special school board meeting held at Dunbar Middle School in the auditorium at 5:30 p.m. Tuesday, January 26, 2021 to order. And I would like to acknowledge that the school board holds special and continued meetings when necessary. Special meetings are held when called by the chair or when requested by 2 or more members. Special meetings may be called provided each member is duly notified or a reasonable attempt has been made to notify each member. Business that does not come within the purposes set forth in the call of the meeting is not transacted at any special meeting of the school board unless the members present unanimously agree to consider additional items of business. Please note that reasonable order or reasonable under the circumstances of a special or continued meeting is given that notice contemporaneously with the notice provided to the members of the school board. So all things have been done properly and in order for this meeting, and so simply would like to entertain a motion that this special meeting will commence, and the only item of importance that we will discuss tonight will be pertaining to matters relating to fiscal responsibility and our FY 2021-22 operating budget proposal. Is there a motion for such for our special meeting? No, this is for the call to order. This is just for the meeting. All right, been moved by Dr. Brennan. Is there a second? Second by Dr. Carter, that our special meeting will take place in light of the item that we have stated. And hearing no questions or discussion, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the motion carries. I'm going to stand now for the Pledge of Allegiance. To my right, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, members of the board, for your willingness. We have a very active board. We're meeting Tuesday after Tuesday after Tuesday, it appears. And in light of policy BDB, unless there are any objection, the agenda has already been approved in compliance with our policy, and we will now move to the agenda items. For the purposes of the meeting, you may discover turning your mic off and turning it on when it's time for you to speak might be helpful if you so choose. Tonight, we have before us something that, according to the calendar that we embraced earlier in terms of our budget process, we are in the midst of that, and in light of the wisdom of our administration, we paused in our discussion in last Tuesday's meeting, and now that brings us tonight, where there are some matters that we need to get some clear direction or give clear direction and understand particulars relating to our budget. So I'm going to turn the floor now over to Dr. Edwards, who will lead us in our one item of discussion tonight, FY 2021-22 operating budget discussion.
Thank you. Mic check and make sure you can hear me. Okay. So what we are going to do is first let me give you an overview of our process. So tonight we're discussing the budget items that were introduced last week. We will continue that discussion over the next couple months. And in mid-May, we will have a public public budget hearing. And then at that point, the board will actually adopt the budget. So there is a process. Although we're doing these items, the budget in its entirety will be adopted in May before the April 1st deadline, and then we will proceed with the council part. For purposes of discussion tonight, we have been asked to submit to our city manager our request for our revenue, which I will do at the end of this week. So as part of this discussion tonight, we also need to discuss that as it pertains to Lynchburg City Schools' request for revenue while we continue to work on the budget. There are a couple of items. You should have the updated, and we will continue to update it with dates on it so that we all have the same one. That was updated on January 21st, and there are three items that we just need to correct that have an omission and a typo. So before we get started, I do want to go to number 4, which talks about compensation, and under the description of number 4, it talks about adding steps 31, 32, 33, and there should be a step 34 that was omitted. So if we all just update that, and when we get the next printed copy at the next board meeting, we'll make sure that that's updated. And then the other item on items 37 and 38, which are the VPI kindergarten program and the VPI kindergarten teacher and assistant. That should be for the 4-year-old program, not 3-year-old. 3-year-old is covered up in early childhood. So for number 37 and number 38, under the description, it is an additional 4-year-old VPI class, similar to the ones that we have right now. So just want to make sure that we all have those items up for corrected on our agenda. Just a reminder that we did go over items 1, 2, and 3, which are the compensation for salary at our last board meeting. The board did vote to move the staff to their step increase for February 2021. This follows the $1,000 bonus that they received the first half of the year. So the step increase for 2021 will be effective the second half of the year, prorated based on the timing in the year. Also, as a part of number 2, the board voted to move the staff up in July 2021, sort of to get us back on track with that, which would cover the bonus that is currently out there by the governor, proposed by the governor, or raise, whichever, or cost of living, but we will work those details out as they come forward. So items 1, 2, and 3 have been taken care of, and tonight we're going to jump around and try to get some more of these items, and I will say we will not finish all of them tonight, so unless you're really ambitious, and we're going to do that, but we do want to cover many of them tonight. Some of them are high priority and they have impact on multiple things, and others are items that we wanted to put on here for discussion and consideration. So let's be clear that these are all discussion, consideration for the board to just talk about, and it's the only time we can get together as a group to talk about these items. So I will start with a few items.
Yeah, and Madam Superintendent, if you could, we do want the board to recognize as we seek to move through this, that there may well be some administrative priorities or thoughts that we would certainly want to hear, and then we want to be able to hear from each board member your own particular thoughts and areas of focus, and somehow as we deal with both of them, we'll ultimately end up somewhere where we can make some decisions. Dr. Gupta?
I just wanted to ask, before the new request, how much is the total adds up to leaving the Human Resource Information System, which is TBD?
I do not have a total, but I can calculate that for you in a second. You're asking for everything up until?
number 36, which
Okay,
is
hold on,
TBD.
let me just grab all that. Well, it's kind of hard, I got to subtract out some things. Give me a second, because some of them are all together. So, but I can, or Kim, while I talk, can you work on that? Get in the phone? Thank you.
I had the number from last presentation. Let me just
Is it
find that.
still 2 million?
It was 3 million. It was just a little over 3 million. I took the high, because a lot of them are, you have to choose one or the other.
Right.
And we took the highest, if you had taken the highest, and it was 3,088,464. That does not have the 37, 38, and 39 in it.
Okay.
Now, I want to make sure that, and we want to thank Mr. Rule and the fine people here. This is a wonderful setup that we do want the public to hear, and each board member needs to hear. So I'm not sure if each of the last communication transactions were heard by all board members, and I'm seeing here that they don't. So, Dr. Edwards, can you help us to understand what we
So
are doing?
the question that Dr. Gupta asked was, what is the total for numbers 1 all the way up to 36, excluding 36, which has a TBD on it? And Ms. Lakonich explained that it is $3,800,000.
3,088,000.
$3,088,000, with the understanding that she took the highest of things that we're choosing through. So if you look at 1, 2, and 3, we were choosing one of those options. If you look at 8, 9, and 10, which are the benefits, we would be working off of one of those options, not all 3 of them. So it's not as simple as just adding up every column, so, okay? The other thing that I wanted to just mention, and for the benefit of the board and the public, and I'll just pick one. If we go to, let's say, number 26, and you see that that is a school counselor at R.S. Payne, and you'll see the compensation for that is $72,463. And when we do the estimated cost of that, that is the cost for the employer to bring that employee on board. So it includes their salary, their benefits package, and since we don't know who we're going to hire, if they're single or family, we always go with the higher option. It includes any contribution we might have to VRS and other things that, as the employer, we need to make sure we factor in if we need to pay Social Security and all those things. So when you see a cost, an estimated cost, and I know some members of the public may have wondered, is that cost the salary of that individual person? It is the all-encompass benefits package and everything cost to us as an employer so that we don't miss anything, and we certainly don't want to miss budget. So just wanted to clear that up.
All board members clear on that very important point. All right, Dr. Edwards, thank you.
The other thing that I want to make sure is as we go through, if there's something on here, a number that you're like, I need a little bit more information on, we have our directors who are on standby through Zoom who would be happy to answer any questions that either myself or Ms. Pugh or Ms. Lakonich can't answer, or if you want more detail, because it's important that you understand what we're considering in its totality before we go ahead and make any discussion or decision.
These are requests which came to you from the system?
Yes, so these represent requests which came to us from our administrative team, meetings that we've had with building principals and their staff, central office staff. Some of them may have come from some of you as we included in here as requests. Not every single request made it to this list. I just want to say that if you're sitting out there and my request did not make it to the list. And if it was something that we could do that was even swap, that wouldn't impact the budget, we probably did it and didn't include it in here.
Are you open to expanding the space, scope, scale?
I certainly am, sir, and I think there's some...
Like number 29.
There's some room on here that as we discuss, we can certainly entertain that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's why it's important to know the final approval is not going to be until March. So at any point, we can go back and revisit, rebalance, and just have that discussion, but it's not going to be final, at least for the board side, until we have that meeting in mid-March.
Because I wanted to give an example, like number 29 says half athletic director for EC Glass. could we add Heritage High School half athletic director? So some people may not ask, but their programs are growing, and there may be a need. So.
Yep, we can certainly, as we go through, add, entertain, and have that conversation for the full discussion of the board. So there are a few that I wanted to start with, and I by no means want to hog the meeting, but there are some things that we wanted to just kind of go through tonight. And then, of course, if there are things that the board wants to entertain tonight, we can. But I also remind you that we do have additional meetings scheduled. We do have another full work session scheduled in February, as well as having the opportunity at a February meeting, a regular meeting, to go through this. So I'm going to start with, since we started with some compensation with 1, 2, and 3, I want to actually take us to number 4, which is to reconfigure the pay schedules to add steps 31, 32, 33, and 34 to address pay equity for our veteran staff. And this, we actually met with several members of our staff to discuss some of the concerns about pay equity. If you recall, you've been on the board for a while, you've had various members of the staff come and talk to and speak to some of the things that happened when we had that big recession in 2008, when things were cut, and then, we have subsequently moved on from there. So having met with them and working with our team, we do feel like we can address some of the pay equity that 2008, 2009 occurred by adding these steps, and the cost of that would be about $91,000. But it would bring our veteran staff up to a more comparable level. And let me be clear, it does not address the bigger picture of some of the pay equity that Virginia has when you look across the country, but at least it's a step in the right direction to addressing some of the things that we have here in Lynchburg City Schools. And Kim, do you want to add anything to that before we open it up for discussion?
No, you covered it. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, discussion on the matter, Dr. Sinha.
How many teachers or veteran staff would that impact?
How many staff members are we talking about?
It is 40. There are some that are already exceeding it, but there are 40 that would be impacted in
Okay,
this.
about 40 staff members, 40 that would be impacted.
Dr. Gupta?
I personally support it. Being an older guy who's been in the education, normally we leave our veterans out. And they are the pine. They have given their loyalty, blood, and sweat to this division, and they stick out. They've been with us for a long time. So their longevity should be appreciated. We should not leave them out, out in a freezer where the steps are frozen for them. That doesn't make sense. So I fully support this, number 4.
Thank you. Dr. Carter?
I have to echo Dr. Gupta's sentiments because I've talked to some of these teachers and they have been waiting for an increase. Some were over step 25 or they were waiting for the bonus and the time. And then we've never been able to compensate them for that due to all of that. But I am supportive.
All right. And Dr. Carter, is your mic on?
Oh, no.
Can you restate what you said? What every board member says is very important, and I want the public to hear everything you have to say. It'll go right to Ms. Morrison, but Dr. Carter, if you could repeat what you stated, please.
I want to echo Dr. Gupta in stating that I also really want to make sure that we are able to compensate our teachers that are in this 31, 32, 33, and 34 bracket. These are the same teachers that have been anticipating at step 25 that they will get a significant increase, and it never happened. So I think it's time, and it's great that we can do this now and offer this opportunity to them.
Thank you. Ms. Morrison?
I agree with my colleagues. I think this is long overdue, and it's a step. It doesn't fix it all, but it's a definite beginning. And I don't think we can place any value on what knowledge these veteran teachers share with not only our students, but our other teachers and staff. And I think we need to do what we can to make sure we retain these teachers. But I think this is a start.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. Any other board members with discussion on this matter? I would certainly tend to agree with each board member that has stated their case. Anyone to the contrary of support of this? Ms. Evans? You are, so there, everybody's in support. So Dr. Edwards, right now that's okay.
I will put that as a yes to bring to the final meeting for approval. Okay. Thank you. The next one, actually, this is a comparison one, is our number 5 and 6. So on May 1st, 2021, from the state, we're going to increase the minimum wage to $9.50 an hour, and then it's due to increase again on January 1st, 2022 to $11 an hour. So May 1st, $9.50 an hour, January 2022, $11 an hour. That is the minimum level of what we would be required to do. And you see a cost for us to do that. And it's mostly affecting our substitutes because all of our staff, our regular staff, are at or above living wage. So that doesn't affect anybody except many of our substitute positions. That's number 5. Number 6 takes that one step further and suggests that rather than switching to $9.50 an hour on May 1st and then going back on January 1st, 2022, moving everyone to $11 an hour, can we just move everybody to the $11 an hour, which would get us a step closer to addressing the living wage as we wanted to. And this again is for substitute positions that are already below that area. So you have a choice of whether or not you want to stick with 5, which will be what the mandate is, or does this board want to move to 6, which is making that increase and for everyone as of 5/1/2020.
Discussion on this option at this time?
When you say
Dr. Gupta?
When you say mandate, means it's required for us to have 950.
Yes.
So the incremental cost beyond mandate is about $90,000.
Correct.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Anyone else? Is there anyone in support of number 6? Dr. Carter?
And I'm in favor of number 6. I know how difficult it is for us to have a good reserve of substitutes, and also that we are competing with the other school divisions in our area. And if we want good substitutes, we're going to have to be competitive. And this is a great way to start that competition.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Is there anyone that would prefer us to deal with number 5? All right, Dr. Millis, please speak to your thoughts.
We're going to have to deal with limited funds, and I think we need to be a little prudent. I certainly would. I know our substitute pay has been an issue regarding actually being able to recruit substitutes. If we were able to swing it and start the $11 an hour earlier, that'd be great. But I think it's a little more prudent. We'd be a little conservative with respect to this.
So in essence, the $9.50, just for the public's understanding, what is the current rate?
What's the current minimum wage, Kim?
$7.25.
Thank you, $7.25.
All right, so 5 would bring us from $7.25 to $9.50, and Dr. Millis is saying that we would start there, not opposed to the 11, but start where we are and then move to 11. Is there anyone else that would support that sort of number 5? Okay.
Understanding this or understanding me?
All right. What we're doing at this time, Can you hear me now, School Board Member Evans? I would take my mask off, but I'm trying to follow the protocols. So let me try again. There are some of you who have spoken to 6, which would take us to the $11 now and not wait till January 1 for substitute pay adjustment. There's some wisdom that we would stay with 5, which would put us at $9.50, which is an increase from the current rate of $7.25. So we would start with $9.50 as of May 1, and then go to the $11 at the first of the year of 2022. So I was asking, is there anyone else in support of item 5 along with Dr. Millis? If so, please express yourself.
Could Dr. Nillis repeat? I think we had trouble hearing Dr. Nillis.
Dr. Millis, I could hear you, but the others, would you restate your thoughts about item 5?
I think just as a matter of prudence and being a little conservative with our discussions here, that we should stay with the mandated. We don't raise our own revenue, which we all recognize. Certainly it would be nice to be able to jump to the $11 an hour right off the bat. I do acknowledge, I think we all realize that recruiting substitutes is an issue, and pay contributes to that. But I think we're probably going to have to deal with reality, and I think starting with the $9.50 an hour is what I would support.
All right, you have heard Dr. Nillis' thoughts. Is there anyone in support of option 5? Dr. Gupta.
A hypothetical question for Dr. Edwards. There is some talk of a federal mandate of a $15 an hour minimum wage. So if it comes in middle of the fiscal year, what will happen to our budget?
Well, if it's a mandate, we just have to make it happen. We don't really have much of a choice if that's coming down. And 15 would affect a lot more than just subs, because we do have other staff that are at, $11.47, $12, and that kind of stuff. So it would definitely have a bigger impact than this change would have. So I don't have that number or figure, but I do know we have several positions that are under 15 right now.
And we all understand 950 or 11, both are below poverty line.
Point well taken. All right, Dr. Carter.
The other reason for the compensation on number 6 is right now, currently, our bus drivers are at $11. Is it?
Our bus drivers are over living wage. I think we made that change, right? All of our bus drivers are
Bus drivers, contracted are, the subs are still at 11.
I think, and don't let me tell a false tale up here, Kim, but the only positions that are under our, what was 1128 when we did living wage, are some of these substitute custodian, substitute aid positions. So
then
everybody else we moved up.
Right, so we're asking substitutes to come for less than what we're going to pay the bus drivers?
In some positions, that is currently correct, which is why it's on this agenda for discussion.
One of the lowest, I believe, for our subs is at $8.25 an hour.
Did you say
So $8.25. So there's different categories. You have your sub bus assistants, your sub bus drivers, your sub custodians, you have your teachers, your IAs. The lowest that's on our list is the $8.25 an hour sub.
So the lowest is $8.25 an hour for some of our subs, currently.
All right, thank you, Ms. Laconich. Obviously, we've heard all of our input at this time. It would appear to me, in light of what the board is saying, is there any disagreement that we would be leaning towards 6 at this time? All right, let the record so state. Of course, we're coming back around to actually vote on the budget at the appropriate time. Dr. Edwards?
Okay, thank you. Moving now to numbers 8, 9, and 10, which are all about benefits and the projected health insurance increase. So in 8, we're projecting a 5% increase on the employer side. In 9, it's a 7%, and in 10, it's a 10%, with the difference being 375,000, 525,000, and 750,000. We don't get to determine which percent we want, so that's not up for option for us to tell them to say, go with the 5. But the reason why it's here is that we need to budget for it, and whether or not we budget for worst case scenario at the high end, the 750 or 5%, it also affects the other entities that we work with that also are tied to our insurance. So if we're budgeting for the increase, then we're going to need to let Laurel and Gov School and everybody else know so that they can adjust their budgets accordingly. So, and I just, Kim, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're asking the board between 8, 9, and 10, do we want to go with the 375 as that's our guess, or do we want to go with the 525, let's play in the middle, or do we want to be very cautious and say, let's go with the 750 and hope for a lot lower, is what we're asking in 8, 9, and 10.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards, and I'm certainly thankful to the Finance Committee, Mr. Harvey, and the previous discussions we may have had in that regard. Dr. Gupta, Dr. Sinha, and then Dr. Gupta.
I'm going to separate these.
I know it. You have 2 names.
Who makes the determination of the percentage increase? Is that based on what we think we'll use in the health reserve by the Finance Committee, or is that some other entity that advises us?
Kim, you want to take that?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry. What determines?
What's determining the increase that us as the employer may face, the 5, the 7, the 10?
So for the last 2 years, we have experienced that what we're taking in from the employer and the employee contributions is not sufficient for the claims. We do have a consultant that gives us guidance on that, and we do know, he did come and speak to the Finance Committee, that we do need to take some action. We are starting with the city an RFP process for health, dental, and vision, and that may play into it down the road, but we do need to be proactive because we are still continuing to take in less than we are paying out. So being self-insured, it is so volatile that it's not a set amount each month, and we're just paying the actual claims.
Yeah, we weren't able to capture it, Mr. Connors. It's not your fault.
So is this due to variability in the insurance company world that is being imposed on us? Like, would our rates go up? Is that what this projected increase is?
It's not necessarily our rates are going up because we're self-insured. So we have to fund our own claims.
Okay.
And what is put into this account to fund the claims are the employer's contribution and then the employee's contribution through the payroll. And we've already went through open enrollment, and we started the plan year, so we cannot make any changes towards the employee at this time. So at this point, we were really looking at the employer contribution, and as we continue to see that what's coming in is not sufficient to what we're paying out in the claims, that we really feel that we need to act on it. Now, it is true that we still have the $2 million health insurance reserve at the city, and that is always an option for the board. But when we're building the budget, we want to be able to make sure that what we're putting in there we think is sufficient.
So this is not necessarily tied to rates from the insurance company as much as it's tied to our ability to pay our own claims, and whether or not we think, based on patterns that we've seen over the last couple of years, Are our claims going up, therefore our responsibility to fill what I'm gonna call our claim kitty? Do we need to add more money to that based on what our insurance broker is projecting on our, I guess, activity in the claims? So maybe, is that, okay. And did I do a good job?
Yes.
All right.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mr. Harvey.
Yeah, I think when we discussed this in Finance Committee, I mean, our consultant basically said, we're gonna need to plan for this. And I do believe that they're coming back in February. We've asked them to conduct quarterly reviews with us to kind of keep us up to speed with what's kind of happening. So hopefully moving forward, we can have a better pulse on this to predict this. So there are three options here, and we're basically trying to budget. At this point, we're still in somewhat of a guessing game. We don't know what that actual figure will be yet, but we're trying to anticipate what that might be for the budgeting purposes. So what my recommendation would be for us to consider number 9, which would be 7%, because there will be, you know, some further discussions that we would need to have as to employee contribution versus employer contribution, all of that which will need to be dealt with in the future as more of these numbers come to light and we have a better understanding of this. I believe that if we look at 7%, that allows us a very good and stable budget number that I believe will be a conservative enough number that we should be better protected. But, you know, as we've known, and this is one of the questions that Dr. Gupta has asked, you know, for over the past couple of years that I've been on the board, is dealing with that deficit that we obviously show continuing to happen each year with their health insurance. So this would be us as a board budgeting an amount to help cover that probable increase in our health insurance costs.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey, for your input, articulating support at this time for number 9. I'm going to go to Dr. Brennan and then back to Dr. Sinha.
So this is my first shot at talking. Can you hear me? Okay. So I think there are two questions here. One is of a philosophical one, which, you know, I bring before the board, which is that we're being asked, do we want to match, do we want to help employees by subsidizing their health insurance, no matter what that rate is? And I think the board would want to do that, whether it's 5%, 7%, or 10%. We don't want the employees to pay for their insurance, those increases. We want to do that. So I think that's kind of one philosophical question. The other is, as Mr. Harvey was saying, I don't think we're really, you know, we're really rolling the dice as far as knowing is it 5% or 7 or 10%. Hopefully, in the next month or so, they will have some more information. So I think either walk the middle road and say we want to do 7%, or say, can the administration come back to us in a month or 2 months before the April 1st deadline to say, what is the insurance company saying? But I think we're kind of guessing at what we're doing as far as this rate goes.
We are.
I think that the message is we do want to subsidize health insurance for our employees at whatever rate we need to.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Well stated. Dr. Sinha?
I'm sort of piggybacking on what Dr. Brennan is saying. I would not want to see any cost increases to the extent possible to avoid passing those through to our staff, because those step increases, depending on what year and cycle you're in, may not be enough to cover sizable costs in, you know, health premiums. So I would really hope that the increase isn't that much and that we can cover it and we don't have to increase deductions on our staff.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha, for your input. Dr. Gupta?
You know, our teachers don't make $1 million a year. They're in education business because they love to teach our kids. So with the low compensation, we can be an attractive division by an attractive benefits package. So that's number one. Number two, if I'm a teacher, I'll be pretty upset. You give me from one hand as a step increase, and you take it from the other hand as a health insurance increase. So basically, I'm starting where I began this year. And you gave me an illusion that I got an increase. So that doesn't make sense. So we have to be clear to these teachers and staff that guess what? the net increase will be zero, and that's not good. You know, so whatever the increase in health insurance is, we eat it up. I will not call the word subsidy, but you know, we basically support.
Right, the chair certainly is admiring the wisdom around the table, Dr. Edwards.
I just want to remind everybody to turn their mics on.
That's
Dr.
correct.
Sinha, I don't know if yours
thank
is
you.
on, is it? It says it's on, okay, because I'm just making sure people can hear. I can hear all of you, but I don't know if they can hear you down there.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards, because I was suggesting the same thing. So, yeah, keep them on. I think we're going to be all right if everybody's on, because we need to hear what you had to say, and some powerful things being said around the table. Dr. Carter?
And I may be wrong, but I thought I heard at the insurance carrier informed us that if we look at the 7 or 5%, then we're pretty much looking at 3% or 5% from the employees, versus if we look at 10%, then we will probably be able to absorb all of the increase. Did I hear that incorrect?
Mr. Harvey, you'd like to respond?
Yeah, I do believe that was one of the projections that he did make, and that's why I was sort of recommending number 9 with sticking to the 7%, because that's sort of the middle of the road, and then we can get, once we have more information, we can get into much more of the specifics, and hopefully we'll have a much better read on this by the time that we need to have our final vote. I think during that conversation, we can have more of that philosophical question that Dr. Brennan was asking, whether or not any part of that is borne by the employee, or if it's all going to be by the employer. So, you know, the amounts, I think, if I remember correctly, when we were looking at some of this, even if there was a share with the employee, they would be minimal for each employee. So we're not, I understand what Dr. Gupta and Dr. Sinha are talking about in terms of the increase, the step increase, and having that all go to healthcare costs. I don't believe that would be the case at all when I was looking at some of the numbers when he presented them to us during our finance committee meeting. So I think if we take a sort of the middle of the road approach and understand that we're just estimating at this point still, next month we'll have a little bit better read when he comes back to the finance committee and sort of updates us. We'll have a little bit better read on that we can start honing in a little more as we move forward, and hopefully have a much more solid understanding what those numbers might be by the time we go to vote on this. But for the sake of budgeting purposes right now, I think, you know, looking at adding that $525,000 to our budget would be prudent.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Ms. Morrison?
Mrs. Laconich, what did you say about open enrollment? That we're in open enrollment now?
Well, we just finished open enrollment, and the new plan year started January 1st. So at one point there was discussion about, you know, with the consultant of employee-employer options, but at this point we are set with what the employee is paying for 2021. So that by default results in the school division having to cover any deficits that we're experiencing.
And I think that's important for us to know, because we've completed it, and so any increase we will cover. We've just got to figure out
for this year
what Mr. Harvey said is what percentage do we do. So it would not go back to the employee. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So with that said, and with respect to Mr. Harvey's comment, Dr. Edwards or Ms. Laconich, I just want to make sure in my mind, is there any scenario where the tragedy of Dr. Gupta's reality would occur?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
What I want to know, we've got to wait on numbers, but we have 8, 9, and 10. Is there any scenario where, based upon whether we select 8, 9, or 10, or whatever, that the employee would end up having to pay to the degree that it would nullify any step increase, bonus, or whatever we may have given them?
The only way that would occur is that the board would have to actually say, we're going to increase the employee's contribution. Now, if we run over what we have, that's why we have health reserve in our reserve account to cover any claims. That would be the first place that we would go, and then of course trying to look other places to take it. But the point is well taken that from the employee, because we just had open enrollment and because it's January and we started, there is no scenario where come July 1 or August, we say to the employee, oh, well, by the way, now you have to pay more. We would have to revisit that. And that's why we're having this discussion right now, because health insurance is not on school cycle, it's on a yearly cycle. So the answer is no, we would go to our reserves and take care of it that way if we had some really big claims.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. Just wanted to make sure everybody's clear on where the heart of this board is. Dr. Gupta.
It doesn't happen on July 1st, but what happens on January 1st?
We would, again, I mean,
That's
that
what
would
we have
have
to
to
look
be a
at.
decision
See,
that,
that was my concern, is because although it's in a calendar year for the insurance, I don't want to hit their pockets as soon as the calendar year is over.
and I thank you, Dr. Gupta, for bringing it up, because it's a dicey subject to have. And one reason why we wanted to have this conversation now is if, and it's a big if the board decided that at some form or fashion, they were going to change the employee contribution of any part of it, whether it's raise their, deductibles or any kind of change to the employee, having a discussion in January of 2021 for changes that would take effect in January 2022. So if we get all the way through and it's November of 2021, if we start discussing, that discussion change isn't going to happen until January of 2023, not that following January. So I think we're safe to not have this fall back on the employee this time next year.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. And so at best of my reflections, I've heard no one speak to 10. It appears to be most of our comments have been around 9. Is that the pleasure of the board at this time, realizing that we're voting later? Yes. All right, 9, Dr. Edwards.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'm going to jump around, like I said, just picking a couple that I think are a little easier to discuss. So I'm going to take us to page 2, number 17. And this is, number 17 is tuition reimbursement. And what we are requesting, we actually had this in our budget request last year, and we feel very strongly about this for our employees to set aside a separate fund for employee tuition reimbursement with procedures and protocols and follow up the whole 9 yards with that procedure. So it's not just open, but to fund it with $75,000 that's available to employees who are seeking to advance themselves through taking coursework.
Dr. Gupta, did you have something you want to say?
So what will be the cap per employee?
Sorry?
What will be the cap per employee?
What is the maximum amount? And I think there's a couple ways we could do that. Obviously, we don't want to do first come, first serve, so I have a $50,000 bill and I get all of mine funded. And I think it will depend on, and we have to actually look at the rates for, usually we try to do a comparable rate of what a course would cost, being that some private colleges may cost more than public colleges and things like that. So as far as the actual procedures and the how many and all of that, we have still to work all of that out. But we do recognize that we want it to be available to multiple employees. So we will have to cap it. What I would like to do is figure out an interest survey, because I really have no idea how many employees would attend or take additional courses. So we want to get that information before we make a final decision on the how much, how often, and the like.
Dr. Sinha.
Is this additional money or to an existing budget item, or this is a whole shebang for a year?
This to do the shebang for a year. It's not even a shebang, it's just a little bubble, it's a start.
Yeah,
I thought,
I totally
sorry, go ahead.
Ms. Evans, did you want to say?
I completely support this. I wish we could do more than that. I think it's really important, and I think that needs to stay on there.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. All right, I see Ms. Morrison nodding her head. Dr. Gupta, did you have something else?
So is it different from the professional development money we have?
Yeah.
How
It
much
is.
is the professional development money we had?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
How much professional development money do we have?
Ooh, that depends, because we get professional development money through grants as well. In Title II, there's a lot of PD money. We don't have as much in the operating budget because it is heavily supported by grants, our PD money, but this would be a separate item.
All right, hearing no further discussion on that, I believe that that's a favorable, at least at this point.
Okay. And then going down to 19 and 20 right now. And these are two support items. So let me start with 19. Elementary school support. Under strategic plan, you see none, because as I read through the strategic plan, there really isn't anything that speaks to this item. So let me tell you what this item is. In our elementary buildings, our elementary secretaries are 11-month secretaries. And during a non-pandemic year, when we're open pretty much all year long, either we have to pay someone hourly to staff those buildings, or sometimes it's just the building principal, but you can imagine families that are coming up, new registrations, phone calls, and things like that. Plus, just general work to get the building up and running for the school year. So there was a request last year that we move at least one 11-month elementary secretary in a building to be 12 months, so that every school has secretarial support throughout the summer. So that is what number 19 is requesting, and the approximate cost of that.
And every touch with the community and parents weighs into our retention of students and all of those dynamics and effectiveness. Any other thoughts on that item that is not even stated so much in our strategic plan? All right, Dr. Edwards.
Okay. All right. So let me just put a little check here. Number 20 is a special education early childhood request. And again, going back to what occurs during the summer, we have special education teachers, particularly that work at the Early Learning Center, and they are not there for the full 12 months either. And if you know anything about registering our babies during the summer, that happens all summer long. So there was a request that we actually have a special ed lead, instead of a 10-month or 11-month teacher, move that lead to being 12 months, so that we can provide services all summer long and have someone there all summer long. And again, we would cover this currently by just assigning a different staff member to go over and do that work. But it's the first time that these youngsters are entering our system, so it helps to have the actual school staff to work with those families and get them on board. And again, increasing that would be about $12,720.
Board member comments? All right, and so of course realize now, all of this is for now, yes. Yeah, go right ahead, Dr. Evans.
Okay. Okay, y'all got me moving, hold on here. All right, let us move, I skipped one. Number 18. So again, going back to a compensation item for number 18. This was also on our budget proposal last year. In looking at our pay tables for our elementary, middle, and high school principals, one of the things that we noticed is that the elementary and middle school principals are on the same pay schedule, and the high school principals are on a different pay schedule. And there's been lots of conversation about that. And I value the work of all of my principals. And again, this by no means fixes some of the compensation issues across the Commonwealth, but it does allow us to address some of the differences between middle school being a secondary principal position and moving them into probably their own pay table right now with a little bit of adjustment. So, and you can see there's an estimated price tag of $14,000 to make that adjustment for the middle school principal.
All right, any thoughts on that around the table? Everybody's thoughts are important. Ms. Morrison?
I was surprised the amount was so little. But I certainly support any increase that we can give to our middle school principals.
And I would say, going back, I forgot what Ms. Dr. Sinha's word was shebang. It's more like a boop boop as we move along that continuum to increasing and making Lynchburg City a much more competitive place. So, got to start somewhere, and we're taking slow.
I just want to be clear.
Question.
Well, go right. No, go right ahead, Dr. Gupta.
Looking at me, so I started speaking, so I should look for the chair.
Go ahead.
Tuition remission, as Dr. Carter pointed out last time, should not be skewed for one school. You know, we should be more open to other schools to offer and collaborate with us for programs, especially offering discount to our staff in tuition so that, you know, they can get more bang for their buck. If you're going an MSRP for any university, that's not a collaboration. So you have to give us incentive, and that's a collaboration. So I hope in future, if this proposal is approved, we'll be looking for institutions of higher education who are willing to give significant discount for Lynchburg City employees to come and do their programs, not offering the market rate which they do it for everybody.
Are you talking about the tuition reimbursement one? Okay, okay, yes, I agree.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for that. I just want to make sure I'm clear. Is that 14 being divided amongst the three or for each of the middle school principals?
The three. It's amongst the three, right?
Thank you.
It's prorated based on where they are. And
Thank you.
On that.
All right. All right, next. Wait a minute, Dr.
I
Miller?
guess I have a comment on the principal adjustment. It's been helpful to see where we stand with regard to the neighboring divisions. I think that's true for a lot of these positions.
And Dr. Nillis, you are so right. In many of our positions where we stand compared to the neighboring divisions is generally lower. I think I had done a presentation for the board before showing where we are. Some of that depends on whether or not you're first year or mid-year or veteran year. But again, I totally agree with you. And our goal really is to start getting our folks up to being competitive in this area, competitive in the Commonwealth. And I know there's a lot of energy to get the Commonwealth competitive across the United States.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. I appreciate that, and I hope, again, the public and those who are with us tonight can see that we're putting a lot of hours. This may be going rather fast, but it's a lot of hours, and we're trying to do what we need to do. Dr. Gupta.
No, I was just saying, anybody who opposes raising this salary needs to go fill their shoes for a day. Being a middle school principal is not easy in modern day.
Thank you, sir.
Very, very difficult job.
All right, Dr. Edwards?
Yes, so at this point, as I'm looking, there are a couple other things that are on here, but I did say I wanted to be mindful. When you look at numbers 21 through, let's see, 35, with the exception of 34, so I will pull 34 out. 21 through 35 are all positions that we need to discuss. So I will start to shift into that area to discuss specific positions. But I do want to take a moment to just pull out 34. And then before I go into positions, I also want to just open it up to the board to make sure I'm not remiss on anything. So number 34, which says coordinated stipend per JLARC, which is the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, which is a handful. So JLARC recently issued Virginia Department of Ed a series of recommendations. And basically, there's going to be a lot more oversight for special education in Virginia from BDOE, support for divisions. But I have approximately, not approximately, I can tell you exactly how many. There are 27 recommendations for special education in Virginia. And when I was talking to Janine, one of them is this coordinator position for each school to have someone at their school in a coordinator role to sort of oversee special education. So we are still seeking a little bit more clarity on what that means, because in our division we do have special ed leads, which is not what a term that the BDOE has mentioned. So what we did was put in or carve out a space for a stipend for a coordinator of special ed as we try to work through these recommendations from Jay Larkin from BDOE. So what you will see is a stipend for each school to have a special ed coordinator, with more information to come as we get more information on that and other parts of this recommendation.
Thank you, and I want to get right to Ms. Morrison, but this is very timely. I know that Ms. Evans, Dr. Carter, and myself have been hearing about JLOC over the last 2 days with the Capitol Conference, and so you were very accurate, Dr. Edwards. Ms. Morrison?
My question is, do we get any funding for any of this? They just mandate it, but we have to fund the funds.
At this point, we have not been told that we're getting any funding, but we didn't want to be remiss and, yeah.
That's awful.
We might, but
okay.
Right now, not so much.
Ms. Evans and then Dr. Carter.
Going to say, they didn't say yet whether it would be funded or unfunded, but it definitely was discussed quite often. I think you need to keep this in here. We need to have something in here because it is coming, and they made that clear. But everything that I heard yesterday, they were starting a new committee to go back through the standards. What was it? I mean, they've got a lot of work to do, I think, before we get to the point of knowing exactly what we have to hire and what, if it's going to be funded. But I think bottom line is it's smart to keep that money in there because we're going to need it at some point for what's coming.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Dr. Carter?
And it may be possible that our special ed lead may be able to fill that position, then it may not be, or they may need to obtain additional certification or training. But also, there was a lot of talk about each school having registered nurses, not LPNs, but each school has to have a registered nurse. And the question was, would there be any money coming down from that? And it will be another, excuse me, unfunded mandate. But they're really looking at that also.
I don't know if everybody heard about each school possibly having registered nurses as another one that we kind of wait in limbo to see. So.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. So I think the wisdom of Ms. Evans, Dr. Carter, I would certainly concur that that's something that we need to leave in for now and await further instruction.
Okay, so at this point, I wanted to take a pause before I jumped into more positions, which we can certainly go into. There are some other items on here that we skipped from the first and second page, but I wanted to just ask the board, I want to be mindful of both time and making sure that we have a fruitful discussion and that board priorities are also addressed. I just went through a couple of hours. And now I'm going to trade off a little bit, Dr. C, unless you tell me otherwise.
I thank you, Dr. Edwards, and of course the meeting started roughly at 5:30, and so we've only been at it about an hour. It would be nice if I could just go around and allow each board member to maybe express some of the particular items that you have, and then we'll come back, Dr. Edwards, and roll through that for as long as the board can withstand, and then we'll go back at it for the next time. So, Dr. Gupta, I saw your hand up.
I'm just having hearing problems. I was checking
I
my
don't
ears.
know what to say. Okay. All right. What we're going to do now is we're going to pause for just a moment from some of the administrative priorities, and we're going to yield to allow board members to bring up some matters that we may be sensitive to. Then we'll get back to those personnel or positions, et cetera, well, human resource positions, et cetera, with Dr. Edwardson. So I want to start with Ms. Evans. And so, of course, there are all of these considerations that you have before us, 112 maybe something else. So we'll start with Ms. Evans. If it's something particular that you'd like to bring up, and then we'll just go quickly around the room.
Does it have to be on the budget or just in general?
Yes, ma'am. It needs to be related to the budget or unless you want to introduce something new for the board to consider.
Oh, no, I was just going to quickly tell y'all what I'm going to send out tomorrow.
Please.
Because our next meeting for the advocacy group is after votes happen.
Sure.
So we need to know what they're working on and what we need to push. So I have made a document with our strategic plans that line up with what VSBA is pushing, and I will send them to you tomorrow. I felt like we were right where we should be this morning when, I don't know if you were on this morning session, but they had 6 big topics that they were trying to push, and 4 of them were from our strategic plan, which I thought was awesome. It was exciting to see that we're all on the same page. But we have to email and have our voices heard now. We can't wait till after the February meeting. It will be too late. So I will email you everything that they're working on and how it aligns with our strategic plan, and then emails where you can send an email saying, yes, we support this, no, we don't, and that kind of things. And I'll try to get that out in the next day or two.
Thank you, Ms. Evans, for your fine work. That's huge. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Ms. Morrison?
Yes, there are a number of items on this list that anything that impacts our students and our staff, but I am particularly interested in number 16, the governor's school, and adding as many positions as we can with the learning environment that we're facing and the changes that we're going to be facing. I think it would be to our advantage to get as many seats as we can there.
All right.
Did you all understand me?
I heard you. You're talking about item 16 and the Gov School and as many spaces as possible. Yes. So let's pause for a moment and have a discussion about the Gov School. Of course, we know that Mr. Harvey represents us on the Gov School board, regional board of the 19. And I think Dr. Gupta passed some materials out to us as well. So let's have a conversation about where we are with that very important aspect of what we offer to our students. Ms. Evans, please.
That was also on the governor's agenda. Wanting to look at underserved communities within the governor's school and what we can do to make that change. That was on his agenda and it was talked about a lot. So I think that's an important one we need to keep on there as well.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Dr. Brennan.
I'm also in support of item 16 as far as us adding 6 additional slots to our applicants. As everyone knows, this has been a topic that's been discussed a lot by the Lynchburg City School Board, and it was really the main topic at our public hearing last year that came from the public to us and was on our agenda, on our budget, but got lost because of cuts in places. But I think that it really is a very important issue as far as having those spots. They've been available for some time. We've talked about the fact that there are other counties that could use those, and once they are taken up, they're no longer available. I think that the issue that's really pertinent to that is the diversity of the governor's school, and I know that Dr. Gupta and Dr. Coleman had a discussion about that and give us more information, but I'd love to see us balance the fact of taking those 6 spots and trying to then find a way to have more of an equity, diversity issue there, because it's at the state level of wanting to do it, and I think clearly as a school board and as a district we want to do that.
Thank you.
One other comment I'll make, which is that we want to remember the other advantage to those spots is that there is the Ann Wells Memorial Scholarship, which is a scholarship that 2 students, senior students at the government school get based on their academics and based on need. And it's a $15,000 scholarship per year for college. So it's a huge opportunity. So for us to have more of our students available for that opportunity is also a reason to support it.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. I'm going to, very well said, I'm going to ask Dr. Gupta to weigh in if you would.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Gupta.
Mr. Harvey serves on the board. He's, want to give him a chance before I
And
do.
I appreciate that, Dr. Gupta. I would like you to weigh in at this time, and then Mr. Harvey is
Dr.
more than
Coleman
welcome.
and I met with Dr. Smith, who is director of Central Virginia Governor School today, and it started because of my comments last time, and I expressed him that our governor school doesn't represent our base schools right now in terms of diversity. They don't, and he agreed with that. So he showed us a plan which they have, all the governor schools directors have agreed to, and to implement that diversity. But it starts for kids to be applying to governor school and then accepted. Acceptance is a second step. The first phase is for them to get excited to apply. And I think that, and I expressed to him, the faculty and staff doesn't represent the diversity of our city either. So he agreed, and he is willing to work on that. So that will be the first step forward for these kids to be able to see, yeah, this is the place I want to be, and I can have somebody to talk to. So the conversation is on, but he was in support of, he said he has 150 spots. They're not all filled. He'd love to have them all from LCS. So I think based on the discussion, I see all these budget from 3 lenses. And forgive me for lecturing on this, is one piece is essential. The things we have talked so far are essential things. The other piece is investment. The one we are talking about is investment. The third piece for me is cost, which is, we may be talking later on. So this is an investment in our future, and the future of our city. And I see it as not as a cost, as an investment in our city.
Thank you. Mr. Harvey, but you've been ably serving. Do you have anything you would like to contribute? And keep in mind, board, it looks like we have 13, 14, 15, and 16 as options around this, and Ms. Morrison has obviously put out on the table 16. Mr. Harvey, then Dr. Carter, please.
I think all of these options should be considered, and us as a board determine the total number that we would like to acquire. Dr. Brennan, as Dr. Brennan mentioned, this is something we have been discussing for some time, and I do think we need to take advantage of that opportunity. But I think when we talk about the Gov School and we talk about additional slots, we also need to understand that we at LCS have a responsibility to prepare these students to be ready for this rigor and to desire this rigor. So there's an investment that we're going to have to make within our system to prepare these students, to help identify these students, prepare these students for that rigor when they get to Gov School. And I'm talking about total diversity, all of our students. We need to start at an early age, identifying students who will excel at that advanced rigor and who will desire those challenges. We can't wait until 9th grade to start talking to students about attending Gov School or early college or any other programs. So when we talk about this, whatever the numbers might be, the number of slots that we have, we as a school system need to be looking at identifying students that we want, that have that promise, and we want to inspire that promise to ultimately be at the Gov School. So not only is it talking with Dr. Smith and the folks at the Gov School and securing these slots, it's also within our system that we have to be working to prepare students for that.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Dr. Carter?
Well, and Mr. Harvey hit on some of the things that I want to talk about in regards to the Gov school slots or seats there. And one thing you stated about identifying some of the students and maybe the support they need, but I would say that there are plenty of students that are ready for the rigor and that may have not gone there because of the culture there, or because of they've heard things, or the way that maybe they have been treated there, or even when they go there, how they're looked at. And one thing I look at, this is the Pedal Program Initiative, Equity Initiative. Are these the only students? Because I know the Pedal Program is not that large, and there are a number of students that are not even invited or go to the Pedal Program, and they're very intelligent and can do the rigor, but they're not there. So are we just looking at those students, or is it open to all students? We have a lot of students that are in the Go Center, African American students, other students, and we need to look at students with disabilities that may be able to go there, that may need some extra supports with other things that are in their 504 plan or whatever, but they're able to too. We need to look at all the diversities there, but there are a lot of students that start off at the Go Center and it's middle school, then there's nothing for them to go to, so I don't know what happens. And they may continue on in some programs, but when they're invited to the Gov school, they've lost interest, or that's not something they want to do. And a lot of students don't want to be the first Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King trying to go there and do that, because you already have the rigor of the school program, then you're going to be the martyr, and then you're going to be labeled as a Pedal Program Equity Initiative student. So is that going to be your identity the entire time? I don't like that parenthesis. We can just look at students with diverse backgrounds and have them apply, and we can look at students that are already ready, that are in some programs, and they can apply. And look at the application process. And I was looking, I didn't have this before, but about the number of applicants and then the number of the student body. It looks pretty much the same, but so how can I just don't like the way this is written.
I'm going to allow Dr. Edwards to speak to that.
Absolutely. So thank both of you for sharing that. And just so that we're all on the same understanding, Dr. Carter mentioned the PEDAL program, which is a program that we have here in Lynchburg City Schools. PEDAL actually stands for Promoting Excellence Through Accelerated Learning. So it's a K-12 program that sort of taps potential of children through this accelerated learning to get them ready for and exposed to advanced rigor. So that's what the PEDAL program is, and I think the answer to your question is no, it doesn't just have to be through PEDAL, kids who may have participated in a program. But this is one that Dr. Jordan has much more information on, and I think she may be on Zoom so that we can get her, because she's worked with the Gov School and parties to be to talk about this. So if Dr. Jordan is available, hopefully we have sound and everything.
I'll be the first one. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, everybody. We can hear you loud and clear. PEDAL has been the program, the initiative that has a long history in Lynchburg City Schools. My team, I've been working with Ethel Reeves on some projects. We want to revive the spirit of PEDAL, recognizing promise, recognizing talent development. And some of this we're going to talk to the board about in April when we talk about opportunity gaps, achievement gaps. Dr. Smith and I, along with Maria Yeager, have been working on ways to make sure that our students are more prepared, see LCS as a support once they get to governor school, dual enrollment, any of the advanced programs, because you're exactly right. Mr. Harvey, that we've got to support our students, and a lot of the responsibility is on us. So we've been having some meetings between CBGS and LCS to talk about how can we make sure that all students feel at home at the governor's school, how we can make sure that all students are successful. So we are having very regular meetings about this, and I support these efforts because the governor's school is housed in one of our high schools, and it needs to be a representation of who the students in LCS are. Do you have any questions for me as far as this is concerned?
Dr. Gupta has a question, and followed by Dr. Carter.
Just wanted to communicate, Dr. Smith was very appreciative of what you are doing to increase the diversity in the governor's school. So.
Dr. Carter?
For Dr. Smith answering my crazy Saturday night and Sunday emails. He and I have really, we've really enjoyed talking about the potential. I think that there is a great deal of potential in this partnership for both parties. It will be mutually beneficial.
Dr. Carter?
Students are now served by or participate in the pedal program?
I didn't hear the first part of that question. I think you're asking how many students are a part of the pedal program.
Yes.
I don't have those particulars, but I can work with Maria to get those. Are you asking about, because there are many aspects of pedal, are you asking about the specific courses at the secondary level?
No, I'm just trying to figure out how many students actually participate and what's the criteria for participation.
Okay, I don't have now, but I can get it to you.
Okay, because I know there are students that are as gifted and talented that either they don't qualify to be in pedal or they're not in the pedal program.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. And Dr. Jordan, thank you for sharing that. And so where we are, Ms. Morrison brought this up, item 16, which would allow for 2 standard entry seats and 4 pedal program equity initiative, for lack of better phrasing at this time. And I certainly support that. It appears that we have 5 districts. We're District 5. Dr. Roger Jones many years ago introduced the pedal piece as a means by which rigor could be prepared for and ready for a diverse group. And as Dr. Jordan just stated, Dr. Smith suggested as well, we need to revitalize the pedal effort totally and do what we need to do to be getting kids ready for that and making sure we have as many spaces as we can. And so that's that. Dr. Brennan.
Just very briefly, Dr. Jordan, thanks for your effort, and we'll look forward to that presentation in April. But I would also just add that I think that this is just a way for us to discuss this issue of diversity in our advanced placement programs also. I mean, the governor's school is a pretty obvious example of how we can do better, but we certainly need to do better across the board for Lynchburg City Schools as far as our other advanced courses, and this needs to be a project that encompasses all of that.
That's true.
All right, so again, Dr. Carter.
Now, I'm for number 16. I just don't like the fact
Well
that we're
stated.
just trying to make it one group.
And we'll come back with that. Mr. Harvey?
Yeah. The other point that I want to make is remember that LCS is one of several base schools. So if we really want to impact the overall diversity of the Gov school, we need our colleagues at the other base schools to sort of, I don't want to say follow our lead, but in many ways we are the ones who might be pioneering this. And we need them to participate just as actively as we are to have meaningful diversity in the Gov school, not just within LCS. But of course, LCS is the only one that we have control over.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harvey. And so it appeared to me that item 16 would be a yes at this time. And I don't want anyone to lose sight of what Ms. Evans stated at the very beginning about this is something that is a problem across the state, and sitting governor trying to address it. That legislation may or may not get where we need it to go, but the diversity is needed, and we feel confident that Dr. Smith and that board will continue to work, and we will continue to work, both in terms of who is a part of the faculty as well as who's a part of the student body. All right, next.
Well, you got to Ms.
I
Morrison.
got Ms.
so
Morrison
you're
now.
on
Dr. Carter.
Carter.
Wait a minute, Dr. Morrison, Ms. Morrison, was there anything else you had? Dr. Carter?
I was looking at number 24, alternative education.
All right. State your case.
Any support that the students need, I feel that's very important. And a reading specialist, we know that how important reading is. So I think that's very much needed at the alternative education programs. A lot of times they don't have access or not able to receive some of the same supports as other schools. So anyway, we can make them more equitable. That's great. Also looking at...
Hold it with one thing at a time. Dr. Edwards or Dr. Jordan, anyone need to speak to that? Is anyone that would have any objection to that being something that would be considered going forward? All right, very good. Continue, Dr. Carter.
Number 31, safety and security. I think that is something that we really need, a safety risk management manager. And that should be a position to itself to really look at the overall security of the safety drills and make sure they're done in the administration building and everywhere else. And some of the other regulations, that wasn't coming.
Dr. Edwards, you want to speak to that? My eyes look at the estimated cost.
Yes. So that is a supervisor position, which is why the cost went up. And just a reminder that that also includes benefits, VRS, and every other contribution for that particular person. And they would have to work directly with building principals in terms of those safety drills and managing it, as well as our right to know, our OSHA regulations, and many of those things that we do with health and safety. If we continue with the mitigation plan, obviously this person would be very helpful in assisting with that as well. We currently spread these duties across folks right now. That's the way that it's being addressed, but we feel the need to have at least one person to coordinate those efforts for the safety manager. For the reading specialist, just so the public knows what 24 is, this is a reading specialist to provide students who are support at Fort Hill and the Empowerment Academy. So they would share that position, which currently right now, as you said, Dr. Carter, those institutions don't always have as much support provided to them in terms of beyond just the content area.
And hopefully with the safety risk manager, we'll have consistency. We've seen a lot of consistency with the crisis intervention plans, and Barbara's template really did make a huge difference. And so that will be, the other one.
One second. Ms. Morrison would like to speak to 31.
We started looking at this position, I know at least 4 years ago, because we were really concerned about the workman's compensation applications. The number kept going higher and higher. And so we thought this was a suggestion to help us in that area as well. And that would apply to consistency.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. To the same point, Dr. Gupta.
You know, we need to be cognizant of the fact that item 21 to 35, as Dr. Edwards suggested, are all positions. And they add, based on my little brain calculator, I don't have a calculator, about $1.4 million fixed cost to the budget. Means you need that money going forward each year. So not knowing how much money is there, that's a significant amount. And if you take one position and leave the other one out, everything is important to somebody. So is it possible for this board to consider these positions together later on when the budget has stabilized? Because $1.4 million Do you have that chump change in the budget going forward?
No, so, great question. I wish I did have that jump change. All of the decisions that we're making, particularly with staffing, right? Because staffing isn't a one-time cost. It's not like buying a table and then you get so many years out of it before you have to replace it. It's an every year cost. To some degree, and Kim and I are working on this, and we haven't talked about this in terms of this document, but it's broken up into 1 to 39, and then it starts with 101. So I don't want anybody to think we have 112 items that we're requesting. We actually have 36, and then another, 39, and then another 101 to 112 for possible CARES funding. So the other thing that as we learn more about the new CARES money is how much of this can we slide to CARES, so to offset the operating cost, with the understanding that if we're bringing new people on, and to some degree you bring new people on as you have breakage from retirements and things like that, so there's a little bit of savings, but that cost will be with us once CARES is no longer with us. So your point is well taken about the amount.
You may continue, Dr. Gupta. Go ahead.
You mentioned CARES fund, and I have raised that issue before. Most of the CARES fund we have used for buying things. And the important issue still on the burner is the achievement gap. Our kids are falling behind because of the remote learning. So are we looking at possible maybe summer offering instruction and offering our teachers extra money to be able to reduce that achievement gap? And that, in my mind, my personal opinion, will be a better use of CARES fund. And that I don't see in that list. So is there something coming forward?
Yes. So what you speak of is the right now money. So remember, we have a set of CARES money that we originally got that we held for sales tax. That was, and again, depending upon how we have to do this shift, our original plan was to use that to provide that support for summer programming, for right now programming. We're not going to wait for summer to address students' needs, to provide tutors. All that's in the works with current money right now, which is why you don't see it in future operating budget positions. But we have, and I should have brought it with me, I have a whole other list of things that we're doing, that we're proposing right now. And I don't want the board to forget that we did have that 2.5 million of first round CARES that we held just for this concern. The other thing is, as we continue, and I just need to mention this, as we continue our vaccination, which we had our first successful one on Friday,
Right here.
and kudos to Andrew Bryant, LaTanya Brown, all of our nurses, the staff at EC Glass, and everybody in the city who helped with that. Our nurses are working overtime, full-time, and just hard time doing this. So part of what we want to do is make sure that we also compensate them for the work that they're doing, the work that LaTanya Brown's office is doing, to ensure that all of our staff get vaccinated as quickly as we can, and also support city efforts. So plans for the existing money are in the current year. That's why you don't see that.
All right, the points well taken, and we'll have to dive into that as we go along. But I'm going to go back to Dr. Carter. That there's something, point understood, Dr. Gupta, but it appears at least right now there's no objection to what Dr. Carter is stating. Do you have any additional item?
Yes.
Please.
And I'm also looking at the amount of money, the 12 million that must be spent by September 30th, 2023 is to cover some of these costs, and 0% has been spent so far. But I wanted to look at I just want to put all of these together, but as Mrs. Morrison stated about the monies for the middle school principals, that didn't look like it was enough. I looked at and these are possible CARES funding, the student support, only 50,000, and also the student support to set aside funding for tutors, just 26,000, but I was also looking at the behavior supports, and just want to put all those together because I know students would need all the support and that they can get from the behavior coaches and also from the any type of mental health services or behavioral health services that will be needed.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. I'm so governed, and we'll move on with that. All right, Dr. Brennan?
So just very briefly, I'm so supportive of what the board has done so far as looking at the pay scales, discussing tonight about the veteran staff, discussing about substitute pay. I think those are so crucial and are the items that I would certainly support. The governor's school spots are important, but I think the diversity aspect of it is the piece that I'd like to really add to that. That's really important. Let's say it'd be a package that we could work on. And my only other comment is that is item number 35, which is communications of hiring a person to handle social media and things. I would just ask that if we do that or we look into that, that we look at our communication department in general and how we're managing that and how it's organized. We talked last week with our human resource presentation about rebranding Lynchburg City Schools. I think there's a lot of issues there that really need a lot of guidance and help. And I'd be somewhat hesitant to add just another person to the department without really having an overall plan and approach to it. That's my only comment. Thank you, Dr. Coleman.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Well stated. I'm going to yield and come back to me if necessary. Dr. Millis, Dr. Sinha, Dr. Gupta, Mr. Harvey.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Dr. Brennan. A lot of the things I'm very passionate about, we've kind of covered at our last board meeting, and we've kind of covered a lot of those. Thank you to Dr. Edwards and to her staff, because they've picked up a lot of the ones that are key for me. And I'm going to tag on to what Dr. Carter said. For me, 27 and 28 are the musts. That deals with behavioral support, specifically at our elementary schools. You know, as we have students starting to return to school, specifically more full-time, I think that this support system, this support net for them as we move forward is going to be critical, specifically through the elementary school years, because we're going to have a lot of students that, you know, their time with us has been cut down, you know, during this school year. So, you know, in a typical good year, our elementary school staff are able to work with these students 5 days a week. Now they're only working with them 2 days a week. So I do think that there's going to be an extra load on our staff as we move forward into the coming years, and I think having those additional support members there at our elementary school will be helpful. So for me, it's 27 and 28.
All right, thank you so much. Ms. Evans, to the point.
You call me?
Yes.
Sorry, I couldn't hear. Just real quick, I just wanted to add, because nobody said anything, and I just want them to acknowledge the part-time athletic person at Glass is so needed. I can't believe we even have in part-time. They just about need a full-time, but I just want to say that one is definitely yes for me, and they desperately need it.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. All right, and thank you, Mr. Harvey, for your earlier points. I would like, then we'll go back to Dr. Edwards for as long as we can endure for tonight, but I would like to ask us to look at option 7, which is dealing with school board member stipends. And you see an estimated amount there, and I do know that we are simply having a conversation at this time about any number of these issues. Eventually we will take a vote on the budget and do whatever we need to be doing. But in our retreat in November and prior to and subsequent to that, we have had some discussion about school board compensation. And so I did share with each of you all as reminders the realities of the fact that of our 132 school boards that we have in the Commonwealth, there are 4 of them that receive no compensation, 2 appointed boards and 2 elected boards. That in Virginia, the highest paid school board per school board member is Fairfax with $32,000 per school board member, and the lowest is Galax City, which is an appointed school board that pays each board member $150. So I do want us to have some discussion on that And by way of the code, the Virginia Code and Section 22.1, which places appropriating bodies, governing bodies, city council, and school board to be compensated. And according to that 22.1-32 in the C portion, if you are an appointed board, those maximums are determined by the General Assembly, and as you can see for Lynchburg, that would be $2,400 per board member, and there could or could not be any amount for whomever may be the school board chair at the time. So, any discussion on that matter at this time as we are dealing with hard issues? Might as well deal with that one. Ms. Evans.
I really am kind of neither here nor there with compensation for the school board, but I do think people question sometimes, and I mean the public, on, you know, it's always been an unpaid position, but I think they see us every Tuesday or every other Tuesday, and you kind of think that's what they do. But the amount of time put in outside of our meetings is kind of unbelievable. I work a part-time position, so I'm hourly, and I took off yesterday and today so that I could attend that conference for the sake of our students in Lynchburg City Schools. And I chose to do that, which is fine, but I just want the public to realize when people start talking about a stipend, people are taking time off work to do this. People are taking a lot of hours to do this. So I think instead of asking, you know, why would they get paid, I just think it's important to keep that in mind for the public.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Dr. Carter?
I know when Mr. Harvey came on, he was talking about how at his firm, they keep tallies of how many hours that you work for your compensation. And I think you had 916 hours.
623.
How many?
623.
623. And that was your first year, right? Correct?
Pardon, yes, that was first full year.
That he had, and what Mrs. Evans said was so true. When I was salaried and was able to, you know, leave out here and there, I wasn't on the school board. And then when I became an hourly worker, I never could accrue any leave time, because every leave time it was to go to a school function. And then when you're new and you are asking for leave, you know, they're probably saying, why in the world did you hire them? But when you're asking to get off to this time, and you may have a little time at the school to do something, but then you have to also calculate how much time to get to and from there. And if you are not working in the city of Lynchburg, that's even more difficult. And if you don't attend some of the functions, then you hear people say, or the people in the school system say, well, I never see so-and-so there. And to look at equity and how we can really help others that come on the school board, it'll be very difficult if you had certain jobs and wanted to be on the school board. It would be very, very difficult. And some employees are willing to let you make up your time, or you have the flexibility to come in later or go in earlier. A lot of people don't have that flexibility. And so I am for this compensation.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. We're going to hear from Dr.
Morrison raised her hand.
Well, very good. Then Ms. Morrison first, then Dr. Gupta.
Well, actually, Dr. Carter said what I was going to say about equity.
Okay.
We always, like members of the city council, because it's allocated. Sorry, just because it's allocated, if you choose not to take it, you don't have to. I would want that understanding.
Sure. Well said, Ms. Morrison. Dr. Gupta.
And that was my question. So like, I don't want to take that, but I'm in support of it, so we'll have the option to opt out. That's number one. Number two, the compensation and the benefits go together. When you look at attracting minority applicants to the school board, so I would say your suggestion for 7 should have either 11 or 12 as part of it. The school board member benefits. So when you provide them a little bit of compensation and benefit, it will be more attractive for minority candidates to apply. Now, Having said that, I don't know about school board members. If it's only 643 hours, look at the school board chair. That is more than a full-time job.
Ms. Morrison and Dr. Millis can certainly attest to that.
So it is $4,000 or $5,000 is not enough. It's more than a 40-hour job. It's a 60, 70 all day on phone, solving one issue or the other. So it's a little token of appreciation for what is being done. I know people look at it as you're filling your own pockets. And as I said, the option will be to opt out. So you don't have to take that money. I personally don't want to take it. But those who need it should be compensated because it helps them.
Right, any further comments? Dr. Brennan?
I agree with this proposal, and I personally also would be in a position where I would want my salary or my compensation to go to some other part of LCS. But I think it's important that there's a value that's put to these positions, no matter what that sort of number is. But I think that, we do spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of expertise, and I think to say that we do it for free somewhat detracts from what we really are doing. So I think there's value there, and I hope that it would attract more people to come. The other thing is I want to echo what Dr. Gupta says, that I'm so impressed by what the school board chair's time is in this episode. And I think clearly that position needs to be compensated in a way that reflects the amount of time that's put into it. I mean, the times that the chair has to be pulled away from their own personal situation in the middle of a weekend or other times, it's really huge. So I would like to see that be part of this discussion, that the school board chair gets additional compensation.
Any further discussion? Dr. Nilles?
Yeah, I understand everybody's position on this, and as a former chair, it does take a lot of time. It does take personal vacation time. I won't support this, though. I volunteered for this, understanding that it was unpaid. No one twisted my arm. In fact, I begged City Council to appoint me, much to my chagrin. They did, and reappointed me. Anyway, regardless, I don't support this.
Thank you, Dr. Nilles. Mr. Harvey.
Yeah, I support exactly what Dr. Brennan has said. I think that this does assign some value to what we do. I guess being the rookie on the board, and what a heck of a rookie year I've had with COVID and everything else that we've done. As I shared with the board, through my work, I'm able to easily track the hours. That's a lot of time investment. I, like Dr. Brennan and Dr. Gupta, would not take that stipend, but I would appreciate the fact that it is available to encourage people to consider public service like this. And what I would like to offer as an option to those of us who might consider, if this board did approve that, I would like to see if it would be possible for us to create a teacher appreciation fund that money could go to, and somehow, because one of the things I've heard is, some of the teachers have been interested about being able to purchase T-shirts, within their school, and that's something that's always a hard budget to do. But if we could, choose to donate that stipend for some other purpose, whatever that might be. But I've really struggled with this because myself, I agree with Dr. Nilles. I did this on a volunteer basis. No one promised anything. There was no incentives, et cetera, for me, and I appreciate that council has instilled that trust in me to serve on this board with all of you fine people. But I do think that there needs to be some assigned value to it. And I also am a strong supporter that our chair be compensated and a stipend be given for travel and some other costs that he encumbers.
Dr. Gupta?
And by not taking, I'm not saying that I'm not a volunteer. What I'm saying is if somebody wants to be compensated, the fund should be there. And if those funds are not used, they can be used for other things, for athletic events. But It's important, especially for the chair, to have that funds available, because it's more than a full-time job. It takes a lot of time and energy. I hope there was a full-time position for chair. It is a pretty strenuous job. So I'm assuming you're doing 7 and 11 or 12 together.
Well, we'll let the administration come back. I do want to, unless a board member has something else to say on this issue or anything else, we're going to go back to Dr. Edwards for as long as the board wants to remain tonight. But I do want to thank the board for your candid comments around any of these matters that we are addressing. And it makes for very good conversation and builds a team. So everyone's comments are heard, and even if it is in the minority, it has still been heard and will help efficiently and effectively govern how something may go down. So I personally would not want any board member who would want to take the compensation if this is passed and included in the budget. There's a lot of ifs going forward. I don't want us to make anyone feel guilty for taking something that the code allows across Virginia, but I think it is very appropriately said for persons to have that right to donate that for whatever cause or purpose they would so choose to do it. I also recognize that any one of the 9 members of this board can be chair. So as far as the chair is concerned, I guess I'm like the persons who would want to volunteer or give their salaries away. I personally, Dr. Nillis, accepted, wanted to serve in this humble task and would not think I need to get paid as long as I sit in this position any more than you do. I just think going forward, we're going to need to look at the Code of Virginia, make sure that we understand what a school board is, what the Code of Virginia has tasked us to do, our worth and value alongside of any other elected body in this town or this city, which is the city council. And I know that these are some tough looks, and philosophically, Dr. Brennan could create some interesting conversation based upon persons who serve in the past or present. But I'm speaking according to what the code speaks of in terms of a school board, which has value as city council has value, and us being able to appreciate that going forward. All right, thank you so much, and Dr. Edwards, you all will work on that and look at all the logistics of what that would mean going forward. We're going to return now to Dr. Edwards.
Okay, so shifting a little bit into more of the positions, and some of them that I had on my list you brought up, but I just want to kind of cycle back to that. I also want to just make note to the board, last week, they're starting to blend, when we first received notice of the new CARES funding, SR2 I think is now referred to, and it has some wonderful acronym for that as well. I had shared with the board at that time, and that's going to be my favorite statement, at that time, here's the information we had, which was the allowable uses. And at the time that we did receive that funding, which would have been somewhere around January 11th, learning loss was a big one. Also anything related to HVAC, and making sure that, you know, we put in any mitigation strategies, we could support that as well. Since then, and I have not had an opportunity to update you with the new information we've received, additional detailed information, and I know both Ms. Lakanich and I are in meetings with our various counterparts to just kind of dig a little deeper and make sure that we're following the appropriate uses of the funds, but they have expanded that use of our SR2 funds, or the CRRSA funds, as the acronym says, to include a few other things, some of which we were already on. But as we look at our list, and remember, one of the things I said is we have to go back through our list and see which of these things can we put below that black line that can be funded by the additional $12 million that we received in the new ESSER funds, with clear understanding that when it's people, that cost is not going to go away in 2 years when the ESSER funds go away, and that at that point, we need to make sure that we are looking at a sustainable plan, having conversations with council, and so on and so forth. So I do want to make mention, and probably the last line on the updated documentation says other activities that are necessary to maintain operations and continuity of services and continuing to employ existing staff. That line was not there on January 11th when I shared with you the first iteration of how these funds could be used, and clarity has happened, and that line is there along with some other things. So I just want the board to know that as we're looking at positions, while the funding we may be able to do, but just keep in mind the consideration of moving forward, what that means in terms of our conversation. And before the end of the night, one of the things I need is I'm going to have a conversation with the city manager about what our request is. And looking at this ESSER fund, we need to consider that with our request. So I want to shift into a few positions that I've outlined, some of which you've mentioned, but I'm trying to at least look at them from a kid, the closest to kid perspective first, and then moving our way down the list. And I just want to cycle back. One of the ones that was pulled out was number 24. That was on my list that Dr. Carter brought up, the reading specialist that supports EA in Fort Hill, and we all believe that that is a critical and necessary position, so I did have that. Before that, number 23, school psychologists, in terms of helping with our testing and evaluation and case management. And this request is coming in support from the Department of Special Education, as well as from the buildings, in terms of supporting our kids and getting that testing. This fits along with a lot of the things that we're seeing, social emotional health, and we want to make sure that we have good data on our kids. So there is a request for 2 in this particular budget. This is number 23, and that would be division-wide to support our kids.
Dr. Carter?
To make sure we're properly identifying students. Would that help us make sure that we're properly identifying students who may need various services? So that would be helpful.
And of course, the task force and that third piece with the social, emotional, all of that. And first of all, hats off if you can find a school psychologist. That's the first thing. But Dr. Nilles?
Well, I was going to say that was actually my first comment. Is how available are school psychologists, and I know didn't the state provide more funding for some of the caseworkers and psychologists? Does that help cover this, or is this over and above?
I think this is over and above, right, Kim, beyond what we got for our funding for that, because we have some existing.
Okay.
And yes, they are hard to find. So if you're out there listening, we want to entertain you.
That's right. Dr. Carter?
Also helping with, I know sometimes with special eds, there's concerns from parents how maybe their child is not receiving an IEP they feel is needed. So the social worker will have the expertise to really, hopefully, to identify and set, I'm sure there are consistent criteria now, but to ensure that this is done by a licensed or certified psychologist.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Dr. Gupta?
As I said before, we have already approved about 1.6 to 1.7 million dollars in new long-term expense for the division. Long-term means year after year, cares will be come and gone, that money will still be needed in the budget. Now, we can go item by item, but this all adds up to 1.4. Who do you pick and who do you leave out? Who's your favorite child and who's your stepchild? It's difficult for me to pick, because everybody in their eyes has a need. That's why they asked the superintendent to put it in this list. So if you pick one and lose the other one out, you'll have a lot of broken hearts. And it doesn't make sense to move for $1.4 million of additional commitment, knowing the money is uncertain right now. I know CARES $12 million are there, but it's short term. It has a lot of other things which could be done, but this is a long-term commitment, not 1 or 2 year commitment.
And Dr. Gupta, your point is certainly heard. I think the superintendent is suggesting she's bringing items that are closest to the kids to us first, and then getting back to Dr. Brennan's notion of philosophical approach. I think that the superintendent will help us to appreciate where we are with that, and I know that Mr. Harvey has articulated a position, et cetera, but all of this is thought out and thought through to the degree. It's tough, but I think what we're doing now is trying to figure out what's closest to kids, what's out there, and then we will be able to hear how that will be handled.
And Dr. Gupta, we recognize the conundrum that we're in with anything that we add is going to have to be funded in the future. But I will sit here and say, isn't that true for every other school division in Virginia? Aren't they all in the same boat unless some of them are generating revenue that maybe we need to, look at? So yes, while we sit and we know that, and I said this at the last meeting, do we have the conversation with City Council now about here are our needs and this is what we're asking to support our needs? Is that conversation now or is it later because we have some CARES fund that kind of can push, it's just cushioning us now. It's like a Band-Aid. And I want to be real transparent about that. I don't want anybody to later come back and say, well, you should have told us this when you were doing it. And I will say for our administrative team, we are trying to really be thoughtful and mindful about what we need. And as superintendent, it's my job to bring what we need. And I'm being cautious of price tag, but I'm also being mindful of, the children that we serve and what those needs are.
Dr. Gupta?
Everything we do at LCS, I hope it touches kids. Mm-hmm. So whether it's custodian, bus driver, nobody is just out there doing their in Baba land. They're all helping enrich the experience of our kids. Yeah. And my issue is, I know we have CARES funding, and I'm trying to look for a synonymous word other than using the word deceptive, is that you give sort of an impression, we have the money, we'll fund you now, but there's a disclaimer, after 2 years we may not have money. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So that disclaimer keeps us clean, but what happens is after 2 years we may not have the money, and then we'll be struggling to fill that gap. And I don't want to go to a situation where we have to freeze steps again, go through that whole cycle to generate money to fill that gap when the CARES is gone. That's my fear.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Dr. Edwards? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Harvey.
I was like,
yeah, I just wanted to chime in, and I appreciate what Dr. Gupta is bringing to mind, but I want to be careful when we use that term add. We're not adding things, we're identifying need, and that's what we're tasked for on this board, is to identify the need that LCS has. And I know it's hard for us to do when we start running these numbers and start adding them up in our head, because we know that when we get to that final number, we have to figure out where that comes from, and that's difficult. But I think we need to be careful. That will come. That decision will come in the weeks and months ahead as we start to finalize our budget. But I think right now we need to be focusing on need. When I look at this whole list here, with the exception of a few items, almost everything on there is a true need. I mean, we need these things, and I think that's why we have to discuss them as a board and establish a priority on these needs. And so I think that's what we're doing here. You know, when we get to the final, if it ends up being that $3 million that we talked about, you know, $3,088,000, if we get there, you know, then that's when we got to have that discussion. Do we ask for this amount or do we bring it back? But right now, our task at this stage of the game, at the beginning part of developing our budget, is to be identifying the need that we have and helping guide the administration in creating a budget that we then share with the city. This is our first attempt.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Dr. Gupta, you would like to say?
Needs, desires, and wants can take us into a place where it will be very difficult to come back, because I need a Lexus, because if I drive around Lexus, I can find people who look up to me, you know, but a lot of flash with no cash take us to, is a recipe for disaster. So knowing what is long-term sustainable is what we should be doing. As I said before, adding these costs now, we don't want to end up in a situation that 2 years from now we got to freeze those steps again, because our needs this time were more than what we could afford. And we've frozen steps before. We came back this year, we reinstated them, and I want a promise from the superintendent that 2 years from now, that just to backfill what the needs are here, about 1.4 or $500,000 or $250,000, we will not freeze those steps again.
I don't think the superintendent can respond to that, Dr. Gupta, with promise. I think they're hard decisions and that's what we're learning. This board has to make decisions. And we hear the needs, and then we'll make the decisions. And education is evolving. The dynamics that COVID and the exacerbation dynamics are huge. And both our appropriating body, the state and the federal government has to understand that. And so your point is incredibly well taken and precise, as it always is, but I just think in fairness, there's no way that you can make that kind of promise. And we would be negligent to not realize. There's some other items we haven't even talked yet, but you start talking about remote academies. Education is changing, and it's not cheap, and our kids are vitally important. Dr. Edwards, please.
Yes, I cannot make that promise. And I will say to you, Dr. Gupta, even if we sat here and we did nothing, and our whole budget conversation was, yep, keep status quo and move on, I still couldn't make that promise that in 2 years that funding would be there at any level, because I can't guarantee level funding. I can't guarantee any funding from any funding source. And I do want to do this in full transparency, and believe me, your comments are vital and very well taken. And I don't keep mentioning where we'll be in 2 years for the sake of having an out clause so that in 2 years I can say, see, I told you. I'm hopeful that that won't be the conversation. I say that to say, let's all get ready, because if, as Dr. Coleman said, our kids deserve these things, then we need to fight for our kids, our staff that deserve these things. And I know it comes at a risk and a cost to it. And I would say that even if this was a budget year where we didn't have COVID, I felt that way last year. We did this last year. We put things in the budget that we needed, that we wanted, that we thought were important for our staff, and we went to city council and we had to make changes. And some of those things are right back in the same budget again this year. So, but I do want you to say that what you said is real, and the feeling is real, and I have it too. I worry about it too in next year and years to come as well. So, okay. The next, and Dr. Coleman, you hold me accountable to time.
Let me just ask the board, you know, you all are making some powerful statements. Well said, Dr. Gupta, all of you. It's 7:39. How long would you all like to go tonight? We don't have to solve this whole challenge tonight. It's 7:39. What is the pleasure of the board in terms of time? Mr. Harvey?
I'd like to ask Dr. Edwards, my understanding is she would like guidance to have a number to be able to go to the city. So although I would like to say we could get through this in the next 2 minutes, I don't think that's going to be the case, but I think we do need to get through this.
Yes, sir.
And figure out a way to do that.
All right. Anyone else comment on this? Do we need to take a 2-minute break? All right, 2 minutes. You could get out your chair good by that. Let's take a 5-minute break and we'll reconvene.
I've already stolen her all her food.
That's what I got. It says skinny on it, so it must be okay, right? Yeah, right? I'll get it. You got it? Oh, my gosh.
Oh, okay.
I'm having some similar issues, and it wasn't good before, but it sure as heck couldn't get any better. Stress.
Mike's on.
Did not have it on. Thank you so much. So we are back. We reconvened. First, allow me to acknowledge that in my statement dealing with the school board item number 7, which is going to be further looked into by administration, that was inclusive of 2.51 in item 7, in item 11, and item 12. And so that will be looked into accordingly. Dr. Edwards needs us as a board to take a stand as to how we want to handle our request for effort from City Council. And of course, the code says that there's a minimum local effort that our appropriating body must give. I'm not going to state all of that. Of course, they can go as high as they so choose. Our ask, and when we ask, is going to be important. We need to settle that tonight. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Edwards to begin that discussion. And if we can get through that, we certainly will have accomplished a Herculean task for tonight. And we may or may not get to some of the other items. Dr. Edwards?
Yep, absolutely. So little history. Last year and prior years, at least 4, and Ms. LaConnich, keep me honest, the board and the administration has requested of City Council a figure upwards to $42 million, which has represented what we like to say as level funding for those 4 years prior in a row, which really means that although there have been increases in salaries and increases in other areas and mandates, we had not increased the request that we had to City Council, while also simultaneously working with them to make some changes in the capital improvement budget. So with our fund balance, you may remember that in previous years, we've added fund balance money to offset some of the capital improvement projects going forward in the future. So we find ourselves one more time at the ask level for what it is that we are requiring for support from City Council. Just to refresh everyone's memory, the 42 that we started with this time last year as our request in level funding, towards the end of the year, City Council voted to reduce us by $1.5 million, and then at the start of this school year, that ask was reduced by $2 million. Am I correct, Kim, in saying all of that? So for between the 2 years, between that period of the spring into the new school year, was $3.5 million. So rather than starting at 42, and I know Kim knows the exact number down to a penny, right, we are starting somewhere at $39 million, which is where City Council has us as the new level of what they call level funding. So my ask tonight is, prior to receiving the CARES funding and looking at some of the flexibility that we may have with that, our team was prepared to really ask City Council to restore us back to the 42 million so that we can address many of the things that are in our budget proposal, as well as we have a big challenge with, there's no secret that there's some learning loss across the world because children all over the place have been affected by this, and that we have to do some work. So we were set to request 42 and go forward with that. In light of receiving some additional funds and possibly having some flexibility, we may be able to offset temporarily some of the cost in our proposal to be covered by CARES funding right now, which would reduce our ask under 42. It could be back to the 39 as the current level funding for City Council. There's some things to consider with that, given the current climate, and lots of people are suffering. So it's something that's on my heart that, and I've always said this, Lynchburg City Schools wants to be a team player, and we want to understand, we want to be good stewards of money, and we want to respect the initiatives that are supporting everyone in our city, not just our children and our children's families, but all of our residents in our city. So to the degree that we can do that, we want to do that. But we also recognize that, our children are our priority, and what has happened with this pandemic and has hit not only our kids, but our families, our individual staff. So there's much to be done. So tonight, what I'm asking the board to do is, we feel as though, and I would say we from the administration, that we can ask City Council for the 39 and continue to move forward with efforts. That comes at a price of what happens a year from now, 2 years from now. And the reason why we feel that way is because we do have some extra funds in CARES. We know that that's not going to always be here, and I would love to work with the community to say, we understand that you have that extra funds, we understand where you are, we appreciate that you're using that to do this, and that when we get back to an era where CARES funding no longer exists, that the conversations that we can have will start back at, where we left off in terms of level funding. But I also know that some of you feel very strongly about the city's commitment to us in terms of being, if not restored to 42 million, but at least getting closer to that. So I ask your guidance tonight going forward to, and I want to open it up for discussion amongst us so that we can come to some kind of consensus as to what we're going to move forward with asking City Council.
Okay, before I ask Ms. Morrison to get us started, is everybody clear of where we ultimately want to end up? We want to determine whether or not we are okay with a $39 million ask for right now.
Closer to 40, right?
ASK. And opposed to 40, 41, 42, in light of the fact, honestly, and with full transparency, that we have CARES money available to assist us for the now, or whether or not you think we should go after a bigger ASK. All right, Ms. Morrison.
In past discussions, I've said that we need to ask what we need for our students and families. And I think that we have now learned that we can use this money to help us with the things that we truly have identified as needs. I would be in total support of asking for 39 million. I think these are very difficult times for everyone in the community, the schools, the families, the city workers, the school work, everyone. And I think we all need to pitch in, and I think doing this in good faith, knowing that this CARES money is going to go away, that we are going to have to go back and say we need this in our future is, I think, given the political climate of what we're all struggling with, I think this would be a good faith effort.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. Dr. Carter?
One question is, are the CARES funds restricted? Can they be taken, or the CARES, is it restricted or can they be taken? Can that money be
Taken
from the city, Lynchburg City Schools?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so. We have some, there are some restrictions in how we use it, but it was awarded to us and we have the application process.
Well, I'm in support of us just asking for the 39 point whatever.
Kim, can we have the exact
Yes.
figures? That will help.
It is
So that will help
30
the press too, so we get the right.
It is $39,828,498. So $39,828,498.
So 39829,498.
All right, Ms. Evans?
I'm on board with that as well, because it's telling me that we can do that and get what we need for the students. And I think if we're able to do that, I think it's what we need to do. And I do recognize that money is not going to be there, and we will have to address that. Nobody's saying that's going away, but right now, for where we are, I agree that it's.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Other school board members that would like to weigh in. Dr. Gupta?
So I'm assuming you're going to sort of move money out from the things you can use for care funding and from one pot to the other pot and use it. Now, my question is, the money where you're taking out from, are those things needed on a sustainable basis or we can live without them? You see what I'm saying? Because you're taking money out from a pot, putting into the personnel or the other, fixed term things. So the money is limited, everybody should know, but you're moving from the other part. So my thing is, can we live without this bucket of food if need be later on?
So, for example, let's just take upgrades in HVAC or something like that. We might take something out of our maintenance pot, maintenance and facilities pot, that we can put in our CARES pot. And then in 2 years from now, do we still have needs for chillers or upgrades or maintenance? Yes, we will. And that's the delayed ASK ask that says we can't empty the coffers without recognizing that they have to be refilled. Now, are there some one-time costs that we may be able to put in that CARES money that we can get just right now? Yes. Are there $12 million worth of one-time costs? No.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Mr. Harvey?
As last year, I am in support of going to the city and being open and honest and transparent with what our needs are. I understand the desire to not have to do the difficult thing, to not have to ask the difficult question of city council. But I have a friend of mine that has a saying, and his saying is, stay in your lane. And our lane as the school board is to determine what are the needs of our students and LCS. That's our lane. It's council's lane to determine how much money they're going to allocate for us. So I'm a strong supporter that we go to them and say, we need $42 million because we have outlined the need that we have here. If I'm just trying to, I wish I had the brain that Dr. Gupta had, but I'm looking at the numbers moving past the 3.08 million that we talked about earlier. Items 37 through 39, another $110,000. Items 101 through 112, $1.2 million. We haven't even addressed those. That's not even in, that's way beyond that 42 million. So when we're talking about this money that the CARES funding that we have, that's where we could apply that CARES funding. That's what that money in that CARES funding is for, is to help with that achievement gap, that learning loss that we're saying we're trying to accomplish here. So I'm a strong supporter of asking council for what we need. And if they come back to us and say, no, we're not going to do that, that's their lane to decide that. Our lane is to go to them and say, this is what we need. So I would be in support of going to council asking for the 42 million, because that's clearly what we have established as our need.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Other board members like to share their thoughts? Dr. Gupta.
I want to echo what Mr. Harvey just said. You know, the CARES money, in my personal opinion, and very narrow lane, is the falling behind of our kids academically. That's a burning issue, significant issue, and it'll last for us for 3, 4, 5, 6 years to come. So have we appropriated any money for it right now? You know, what are we doing? Will that money be enough? So we don't want to be in a situation where we burn out all the CARES cash and then we don't have anything. We talk about taking care of our kids. It's almost a lost generation. And so we should keep that in mind when we make that ask, that there's a significant issue on the table that will require significant resources and time commitment to overcome the challenge.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Other board members? Please, Dr. Nilles.
Yeah, I support the ask for the 39.8 million. I believe we can do what we need to do for the kids. It does require us to use the CARES funding. I think it's a matter of being transparent, and you know, we're going to need 42 million in a couple of years. That's just the reality of it.
Thank you, Dr. Nilles. Dr. Brennan, would you like to comment?
I would, Dr. Coleman, thank you. I'd also support the request that we ask at this time for 39 million in light of the fact of what's going on in the community. And I think the city is having a tough time, as our, not just the city council, but city government, but also our city community members. I think it's a tough time to go back and say we have $12 million, we'd like some more. However, I also think, and as we all know, I was an English major and not a mathematician, but $12 million still seems to be like a lot of money that we can put towards over the next 2 years doing things better, addressing the achievement gap, addressing the issues that really are crucial right now that this is brought up. So I hope that we can do that. So in 2 years, when we do go back to city council, we say, you know, this is what we've successfully done, so that they would then say, we agree with that and we're willing to, you know, talk about what a new budget should be.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Dr. Sinha, would you like to comment?
Well, I'm informed because I feel like, you know, we've identified what we need. I like the way Mr. Harvey expresses it. They're not, you know, new things. They're needs that we've identified, and we need to find a way to sustainably cover them. However, understanding the situation that almost every family in the is impacted by this. I know we try to support local businesses and stuff in my household, but we're down 1 in 4 person. So we are spending less. A lot of people are spending less. And so that means less for the city to collect taxes to state. So I think we should, I would support the 39.8. Because we have the 12 million in CARES to help recover and remediate the learning loss, socialization loss, all the things that will need to be addressed post-COVID.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. Dr. Carter, had you spoken to this issue? You had. So I believe every board member has had a chance to speak. I will be supporting the recommendation for the 39.8 million. Every now and then we get a surprise. Something falls out the sky that we didn't know. And that is what has happened. We have a track record of being transparent, and it would not be wise of us to not acknowledge that we have learned that $12 million can be used to tackle the largest portion of our board budget, which is human resource related, personnel related. And so, as Dr. Brennan stated, we'll have an opportunity, Dr. Edwards and the administrative team, boots on the ground, to really have some people and Dr. Gupta efforts that can really tackle what we have. And as we show the worth and value of our efforts, we can go back and speak to our appropriating body of the local effort we will need to sustain what we're doing. Dr. Gupta, you may
Yes,
respond.
can I ask one more question? See, we have a Future of Education task force at LCS, and with this new agenda or the new goals we approved, one of the goals is equity in education,
Sure.
which is as a result of has fallen behind because of pandemic. So if it requires money, will city have funds to fulfill those commitments, or they'll be looking to us to fund those additional funds and saying, okay, now tap into your CARES funding. You see what I'm saying? So that should not become a permanent reservoir to go there and dip in for money.
That's a possibility, Dr. Gupta, obviously, but as we are working our FACE, family and community engagement efforts, and I think many of the council members are aware that it's going to take a total city effort to deal with what we're dealing with and not leave that totally to the schools. We use what we have, use it wisely, be transparent, tackle the tough issues that the board identifies and through our goal strategic plan, and let's do what we have to do. It would appear to me at this time that we can be on record that if there could be a board member that would be so willing to make a motion, it would appear to me that there are individuals who are not in favor of the motion for the 39.8, but it would be appropriate for us to go on record with a decision that if there's someone who's willing to make that motion, or someone can make the motion for the 42, and then we can determine that, and I will ask for Ms. Day to call the roll on the vote. Is there a motion on the floor regarding this matter? Mr. Harvey?
I'd like to make a motion that we proceed with upfront and transparent requests to City Council to meet our budget at $42 million.
Is there a second? Will fail for a lack of second. Is there a second? And that motion unfortunately fails. Is there another motion to be brought to the floor at this time? Ms. Morrison?
I'd like to make the motion that we support the request for 39.8.
Been moved by Ms. Morrison for 39.8, seconded by Dr. Carter. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none. Yes, Dr. Carter? Sure. But I hear your point, Dr. Carter. They have what you call by code a minimum amount that they can give for local effort, and they could do that. Those councils listening to us, they could do that. But we're making a good case. We're being solid, and we're asking them for 39.8. All right. There's any further discussion, questions? All right, Ms. Day, if you could call the roll. If you vote yes, you're in favor of the 39.8 as our ASK, and we'll work our way to that. And if you're not in favor of it, you can vote no.
Yes.
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 In that my motion has failed, I will be voting yes, so that there is a resounding unification going to City Council.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Harvey. Could you share the result of that vote, Ms. Clerk? The motion carries. Thank you, Board. Dr. Edwards, is there anything else that we need to do tonight, or we can resume this next week, and of course, certainly at the work session?
Yep, we certainly can resume. I just want to make sure I didn't miss. We are coming back to 7, 11, and 12, because we did not.
Yes, all of those refer to the school board, and I'm going to let you all work it out. It's got to come back to the board anyway.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
And then,
Mr. Harvey has a question.
And I apologize, I don't mean for this to sound flippant, but the purpose of this exercise now seems null and void. if we're saying that we're going to ask 39.8 from City Council, and we've got $12 million that we're going to move some parts of that to cover this budget, is this exercise of us going through each and every item as critical now?
Dr. Edwards, I'd like you to respond to that, and I certainly have at least my little 2-cent contribution to you. But go right ahead, Dr. Edwards.
Absolutely, Mr. Harvey, because we as the administration don't ever want to present something that the school board is not in support of as well. So as far as the items on this list, I do think that we would like to continue with the conversation. But there was also another part of that, and I think Dr. Gupta, you brought up a question as to could some of these things be modified, adjusted, added? I think you discussed the nurses and part-time athletic director at Heritage. So as we go through this also gives me an opportunity to hear from the board about any other priorities, and we may very well say, you know what, we're not in favor of this, but more in favor of that, which would still keep us within our lens of that.
Okay, that makes sense.
I have nothing else to contribute to that response. All right. So hearing that, am I hearing you, Dr. Edwards, that I can move on to the next item of tonight's special meeting?
Sure can.
All right. Thank you so kindly. That moves us to item D, informational items. The next school board meeting, ladies and gentlemen, will be next Tuesday, February the 2nd, Tuesday after Tuesday after Tuesday. And we'll go back at it again. The next school board work session will be Tuesday, February the 16th. Laurel Regional Committee will be meeting on Wednesday, February the 3rd. And the next Central Virginia Governor School meeting is February the 3rd. You see the corresponding times for those. Ms. Evans has helped us to appreciate the next Legislative Advocacy Community Relations Committee will be on Tuesday, February the 9th, and the Finance Committee will be Tuesday, February the 23rd. And you see the times stated there before us. If I did not omit anything, we will now move to our last item, item E, which is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? I'm sorry, go right ahead. Thank
And they really did say many times they want to base policy off what school boards are telling them, not what tell them. They made that pretty clear, so they want to hear our voices.
Yeah. He said he's going to email. Good. It's good. What you're doing is excellent, Ms. Evans, and that's what we need. Thank you for your leadership on that, and we'll look for those emails, and each can communicate with each other. Is there a motion to adjourn? A motion by Ms. Evans.
Second.
Second by Dr. Brennan. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none. All those, Mr. Harvey.
The only thing, I would like to thank the Dunbar Poets for their hospitality and their support, the technical support, all of these folks that have been here this evening. Thank you.
All right, and Dr. Gupta? And the technical staff. All of them. This has been really nice. Really nice. All right, then meeting is adjourned.